saw what Greenspan was doing and the housing bubble that Fed policy was inflating, I knew it was going to end very badly. And I thought a lot of the banks were going to fail. I knew that Fannie and Freddie were going to go under, and I thought that this was going to have a huge consequence on the U.S. economy. I saw a lot of people who were buying houses they couldn't afford with money they had no ability to repay. People were cashing out equity, they were flipping homes, they were buying second and third homes, they were spending all sorts of money. Everybody acted as if they had won the lottery, but I knew it would only be a matter of time before real estate prices started to fall, mortgages started, adjustment rate mortgages would start to reset, and I knew this whole thing was going to implode, and that real estate prices were going to get halved, and a lot of bad things were going to happen. And just as the days of the dot-com bubble, very few people heeded those warnings. Back in 04, 05, 06, people looked at me like I was from outer space, thinking that real estate prices would fall. And so, but I started warning people about it, and in, I guess, 2005, I wrote Crash Proof, and in that book, I predicted a lot of things that were going to happen. And initially, Crash Proof was just going to be a book about the real estate market. The whole book was going to be about the coming collapse of the real estate market. But I ended up deciding to condense that into a chapter and write a more expansive book on the overall U.S. economy, not simply one that was dedicated to what was going to happen in the real estate market. But when I wrote Crash Proof, and the subtitle of the book was How to Profit from the Coming Economic Collapse. So it wasn't how to profit from the bursting of the real estate bubble, or how to profit from the drop in the stock market. I wrote about all these things happening, but that was not what the book was about. It was about the economic collapse. And that hasn't happened yet. That's coming, though. And that's why I'm here, and that's the purpose of the meeting, is to help prepare people, both intellectually and financially, for the real economic crash, which is yet to occur. People think we had it in 2008. That wasn't it. That was just the warm-up. Maybe that was the overture. The opera is still in front of us, not behind us. And when I wrote Crash Proof, and I wrote about all the things that were going to happen in the U.S. economy, that the real estate bubble would burst, that we'd have all these foreclosures, all these bankruptcies, we'd have the worst recession since the Great Depression, we'd have double-digit unemployment, we'd have trillion-dollar deficits, all this stuff I wrote in that book. But the crisis that I was concerned about was not that. It was the crisis that was going to come as a consequence of what the government would do once the housing bubble burst and we had that recession. Because I assumed that the government would learn nothing from its mistakes and would just repeat them. And I knew that, well, the government's going to go right back to the stimulus. It's going to more cheap money, try to reflate the bubble. And that's exactly what the government did. Maybe President Obama, when he ran for office, he was criticizing George Bush based on the things that he did, and then as soon as he took office, he repeated all the same mistakes, only on a bigger scale. And of course, Ben Bernanke is doing all the same things wrong that Alan Greenspan did, only bigger. We did a lot of damage to this economy with 1% interest rates. Imagine how much damage we're doing now when there's zero. And in fact, they've been zero for years, and Ben Bernanke says they're going to stay at zero for a couple more years. So if the housing bubble was created by 1% interest rates, and the whole financial crisis was a result of that reckless policy, imagine the consequences of this. And that's what I was imagining back in 2005 when I was writing that book. I knew that this was going to be the mother of all stimulus, and it was going to produce the mother of all hangovers. Because the problem is the stimulus. That's why the economy is sick. The recession is the free market's attempt to repair the damage that is done to the economy during these artificial booms. I said, that we did a lot of stupid things in the NASDAQ bubble because we were drunk on cheap money, but we were even drunker during the real estate bubble, and we did a lot of stupid things. But eventually, when interest rates rise, people begin to realize all the foolish things that they did. I mean, it happens that you can get drunk and you can do a lot of stupid things. You don't realize it until the following morning, and you wake up. And you're like, I can't believe I did that. Well, I can't believe I bought that condo. What was I thinking? Well, I mean, you just thought it would go up forever because that's what was going on. It was a mania. And it ended, and the market wants to rebalance everything. Right? What did we do wrong? What was the underlying problem in our economy from 2001 through like 2008? We spent too much money. That was the problem. We borrowed too much money. We didn't make enough stuff, so our trade deficit went through the roof because everybody was buying, but nobody was making. All we were doing is extracting equity from our homes. We were living this phony lifestyle of excess consumption based on wealth that didn't really exist. And all this money went into housing, and people were buying houses and fixing up their houses, and then they had to buy all new furniture for their new houses, and then they got new cars for their new garages, and people took vacations. All this on borrowed money. Meanwhile, no one was making anything. We had no ability to pay this money back. When the bubble burst, the party was over. Right? Now you got to pay the bills. And there were a lot more bills than had we had a more severe recession than the one we had in 2001. But the problem was George Bush didn't want to level with the American public and say, you know what? You had a big party under Clinton. We had a stock market bubble. A lot of phony wealth was created. Now we're going to have to endure a couple of years of some pain as we pay for this. Those were not good times. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to be the guy that presided over a deep recession. So, he stimulated. And he got cooperation from the Federal Reserve. And everybody was happy. Because, of course, just like if you're a drug addict and you check into rehab, and instead of, cold turkey, they give you more drugs, yeah, you can have a pretty good time in rehab, but you're not going to accomplish anything. You just get more drugs. They're just handing out drugs. And then eventually, you're now, when you finally have to kick the habit, it's worse. Because now you got more toxins you got to get rid of. So George Bush repeated those mistakes. And so when that bubble burst, we were in a serious mess. We had a lot of debt, and we had a lot of damage to repair. But what did we do? We did the exact same thing. And now, what's happened since 2009? What have we done? We have borrowed trillions and trillions of additional dollars. Whatever the debt was in 2008, it's much, much larger, trillions and trillions of dollars larger. The government now, the national debt, is about $15 trillion. 15 trillion. That's pretty much the size of the economy, the whole GDP. But it's not just 15 trillion. In fact, just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, the president, I think, with a stroke of a pen, added about $1 trillion to that debt without even so much as one vote out of Congress. What the president did is he said that if you're a student, you got a student loan, it starts next year, you don't have to pay your loans back. All you have to do is pay no more than 10% of your disposable income, which is defined as 50% above the poverty rate. And then you only have to pay 10% of that every year. And after 20 years, whatever you haven't paid is forgiven. Of course, it's forgiven for the student, not for the people in the audience, not for the taxpayers. They're going to have to pick up all those forgiven loans. And if you try to figure out what that is, there's $1 trillion worth of student loans. I'm sure that based on, if you ran the numbers, that probably that means that half of it at least is forgiven, which means the other $500 billion is going on the taxpayer. But also, he's helping people who have mortgages that are underwater, they have no equity, they're upside down, maybe 25%, refinance from whatever their mortgage rates are now down to about 4%. Well, that's great for the borrower, but what about the American taxpayer who's stuck on the hook for the difference? Because these are the performing loans. These are the loans that are getting paid. There are a lot of people that stop paying. The government is guaranteeing all these mortgages. And when they refinance them into lower rates, it's the borrower's gain, but it's the lender's pain. Because we don't get that income anymore. It's not, you don't just create money from nothing. Everybody wants to talk about the benefits of the economy because people have lower mortgage payments. Well, what about the pain from the fact that the lenders are collecting less in income on these mortgages? What does that do to the banking sector? What does that do to the taxpayers who own these mortgages and now are going to have to give up a lot of the cash flow? So this adds a lot more to the national debt. And I think even a bigger problem for the student loans is now that we're forgiving the student loans. I mean, imagine, think about how fast college tuitions were rising when the students borrowing the money actually thought they were going to have to pay it back someday. Right? So there was some restraint, not much, because they were getting guaranteed loans from the government. And of course, you're loaning money to an 18-year-old, your 19-year-old. They're not that responsible. They can't really fathom what this means to have to pay back this debt. But if the colleges were able to raise tuitions as fast as they have, when the kids thought they had to pay the money back, imagine how much faster they could raise the tuitions when the students know they don't have to pay the money back. That it's not really a loan, it's kind of a gift. Now imagine what it's going to be like going here to UC Irvine, and pretty soon they're going to give everybody a new car, as part of their tuition. What do you care? I mean, just, borrow $1 million. It doesn't matter, because no matter how much you borrow, you're going to have to make the same payments. And in fact, it doesn't even matter what happens to the interest rate, because you're immune, because your payments are capped, regardless of what happens to interest rates. So this is, the debts are enormous that we have now. And rather than addressing these problems, we've made them all worse. Right? We spent too much money before the crisis. The solution was to spend less. The solution was to save, to kind of rebuild our industrial base. We did the opposite. Instead of repealing a lot of the rules and regulations that led to the crisis, we added more. One of the biggest problems with this financial crisis was that capitalism got blamed for a crisis that was created by government. When I get into a lot of arguments with people on television, some of these other pundits, and I say we need less regulations, and they always come back with the same response. That's how we got into this mess. Deregulation. Like, I work in the financial industry. There was no deregulation. I just got permission to hire people after 3 years of trying. The rules and regulations, when I first started in this industry, I did all the compliance myself. Now I can't even understand it. I have a whole department to handle all the new rules and regulations that were added in the last decade. There was no deregulation. But the problem was the regulations that existed were creating the problem. It was the Federal Reserve. The free market didn't put interest rates down at 1%. Alan Greenspan did that. The free market never would have done that. Fannie and Freddie were guaranteeing all these mortgages. If people didn't believe that there was an implicit guarantee, nobody would have believed it. Fannie and Freddie couldn't have guaranteed all these mortgages without the government standing behind them. That's not the free market. The free market would have prevented that. And there are people that say, well, Fannie and Freddie didn't do subprime. Well, they were the biggest buyers of subprime. Without Fannie and Freddie buying subprime mortgages, there never would have been the ability to originate them if there wasn't somebody there to buy them. And of course, without Alan Greenspan and the teaser rate, there was no subprime market. The whole subprime industry was built on low short-term interest rates. Without those teaser rates, there was no subprime market. So it was a creature that was created by government. Yet the free market got blamed for all the damage that monster created. And that is really providing the impetus for a lot of this movement. Now, I was just down in New York and at Occupy Wall Street. How many people saw some of that footage on the internet? We created that because they're all there blaming capitalism, blaming Wall Street for the financial crisis, for their own plight, for the bailouts. We gave capitalism a real bad name because we preached it, but we didn't practice it. But the people protesting, they don't know that. They think the only reason that the economy is in bad shape is because the rich aren't paying enough taxes. And if we just raise the taxes on the rich, then everything would be fine, because all these rich people are like Warren Buffett, paying no taxes. Everybody was telling me, Warren Buffett doesn't pay any taxes. He pays a lot of taxes. He pays billions and billions in taxes. In fact, when Warren Buffett, and he's really doing the country a disservice by talking, but when he says he doesn't pay any taxes, right? Warren Buffett owns a third of Berkshire Hathaway. A third of the company. The company is paying billions of dollars a year in taxes. 35% of their income is taxes. That's Warren's money. He's paid it as a shareholder in Berkshire